When was the last time you had a conversation with your parents to tell them how much you love them? Or with your partner to say that you're sorry? Or with your friend to say that you forgive them? I found myself in each one of these situations over the past year, struggling to have these conversations, till I decided to do something to change it. Hi everyone, my name is Siddharth, and I love conversations, especially the ones that matter. I believe that meaningful conversations have the power to change our world, and I'm here to share with you how. But before that, I'd like to share a little personal story with each one of you about why this means so much to me. I had some of my favorite conversations growing up with the most important person in my life, my grandfather. I called him Tata. Tata and I spoke about everything under the sun, from Phantom to Tarzan to some of the deepest philosophies of life. But last year, May 3rd, 2018, at 5:20 a.m., that was the moment I had to confront my biggest nightmare. Watching Tata take his last breath. When this happened, I had so many thoughts and emotions in my head, but I just didn't know how to express them. I have over 2,000 friends on Facebook. I'm a part of over 50 WhatsApp groups. I have over 500 contacts on my phone. But in that moment, I couldn't think of more than 2 people I could reach out to have a conversation with and to share how I was really feeling. And even with those 2 people, I just didn't know how to start the conversation asking for support. Over the next few months, I saw the same pattern repeat itself amongst my friends and family. A friend who wanted to speak to his sibling about how they were growing apart. A son who wanted to speak to his parents about how he wanted to marry outside of his religion and nationality. A wife who wanted to speak to a husband about how she felt they were losing the desire in their relationship. In each of these cases, I saw the same pattern repeat itself again and again. People who had thoughts and emotions that needed to be expressed, but there was something that was stopping them from having that conversation. The same thing that had stopped me when I lost Tata for quite a while. Fear. The fear of being rejected, the fear of being judged, the fear that people just won't understand you. How many of you have felt completely lonely, like you have no one to speak to when you're having a terrible day? Please raise your hands. Thank you guys for being honest. So what do? We take all our thoughts and emotions and pack it into a backpack and carry this backpack around with us everywhere. And over time, it just gets heavier and heavier and heavier. Right here. The best decision I took when I lost Tata was to seek the courage to express the pain that I was feeling of not having him anymore in my life to 2 of my best friends, and to recount some of the most beautiful memories I had created with him. Our conversations made me feel lighter, and our friendship became so much deeper. This is when I realized that meaningful conversations have the power to impact our mental health so drastically. Okay, I have a question for all of you. How many of you find it more comfortable opening up to strangers than your own friends and family? Raise your hands. You guys are not alone. Me too. And I want to tell you why. But before that, the 2 people you see on screen next to me, by the way, I'm the one on this side, in case you were wondering, are 2 of my best friends, Ishan and Siddharth. I first met them back in university in Mumbai, and I've known them ever since. I've shared so many beautiful moments with them, including our first job, to our first drink, to our first heartbreak. They even joined me here in Malaysia. And they work with me now, they live with me. In fact, they're here also in the crowd with me, Ishan and Siddharth right there, supporting me. I've known these two for 10 years. Yet last year, which was the 9th year of our friendship, we realized that there was so much that we hadn't spoken about, including some of our biggest goals to some of our tiniest little insecurities. And even when we tried, we often ended up in a fight, judging each other or arguing with each other. So obviously, what did we do? We took some of our most meaningful conversations and had it outside of our friendship, often with strangers. For those of you who said you prefer opening up to strangers rather than friends, have you ever paused and asked yourself why? Because the people I asked this question to said there were no preconceived notions, no biases, no judgments when it came to strangers. They just felt safer there. Harvard conducted a very famous study that concluded that good relationships keep us happier and healthier. Over 75 years, this was the one thing that the study concluded. So if this is the case, I would love all of us to do a little exercise with me, for which I would request all of you to sit comfortably in your seats, leave anything that you're holding on to, and close your eyes for a brief minute. Take one deep breath. And bring to mind that one person in your life, or those two people who hold a lot of meaning for you. Bring to mind their faces, their smiles, the impact that they've had on you. Now, gently open your eyes. My guess is that some of the people who came to your mind were your parents, your partners, your siblings, some of your best friends, some of the longest relationships we hold in our lives, right? Now, here's my question for you. When was the last time you had a conversation that really matters, either to you or to this person? Be honest with yourself. The first time I did this exercise, I realized it was like a rude awakening for me. I realized with some of the longest relationships in my life, I hadn't meaningfully connected with them in years. And this is when I realized that it's not really the length of our relationships, but the depth of our conversation that really makes it meaningful. I actually believe that all of us are really good at having conversations. In fact, it's a life skill that is ingrained in each one of us as human beings, right? But we live in a world of smartphones and social media where screen time has taken over people time. So we just don't feel the need to have conversations anymore. And even when we do, it's normally small talk. I mean, isn't it easier for us to come back after a long day at university or at school and watch Netflix than tell our parents how our day was? Or sit on our dinner table and instead of chatting with the people on the dinner table, catch up with our friends on WhatsApp? Yes? Or birthdays. When was the last time you actually picked up the phone to wish someone on their birthday and have a conversation with them instead of send them a voice note or a WhatsApp message? We just don't feel the need to have conversations anymore. Take for the example this question that we hear all the time. How are you doing? If there was one question that could receive the award for the most number of one-word replies, it would be this question. We just don't feel the need to have conversations anymore. Bronnie Ware was a famous nurse. She worked in palliative care. And she took care of patients in the last couple of years before they died. And she said amongst the top 5 regrets of the dying was this regret. I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. Now imagine spending the rest of your lives not being able to have a conversation that matters to you with the people who really matter to you. So what is a meaningful conversation? And how do we have them? This is what I spent the last few years trying to study and understand. I conducted a series of social experiments, bringing together intimate groups of people with just one objective in mind: to have meaningful conversations. I started off with family, then moved on to friends, then moved on to colleagues, then moved on to strangers over dinner tables. And with each experiment, I started understanding more and more what conversations really entail. And what I want to share with all of you today is the top 3 ingredients that make any conversation meaningful. The first, a meaningful conversation is one in which 2 or more people gather together and are really vulnerable with their thoughts and emotions with each other. They come together both to understand and be understood. And they're willing to be blatantly honest with each other. And finally, they realize that, as Kathy mentioned, right, we all look at the world through a pair of glasses. Some, like me, wear it visibly, but most of us wear it invisibly, and it shapes our entire perspective of how we view the world. A meaningful conversation gives us the opportunity to exchange our pair of glasses and our perspectives to view the world a little differently and make new meaning together. So just like food tastes really yummy when you cook it with the top ingredients, but also when you try a used recipe that it works all the time, what I want to give you next is the 6-step recipe for making any conversation that you want to have with your own community is meaningful. The first, check in. A check-in is a powerful way to start any conversation that matters with you. You see, when we enter any conversation, we are either thinking of what's happening before or what's going to happen later. But a check-in gives us the opportunity to pause and to focus on the conversation right in front of us. And my favorite way to do this is with this question. So, what's on your mind? Because the moment you ask this question, you give an opportunity to a person to arrive into the conversation instead of jumping in. The next, ask open-ended questions. Open-ended questions are what, why, how, what questions. These are not questions that you can answer with a yes or a no. Open-ended questions instantly increase the depth of any conversation that you have. Take, for instance, you meet someone at this venue, right? You bump into them. Instead of asking them, hey, are you also attending this TEDx event? How about you ask them, what brought you here? I'm sure that you will learn so much more about this person through the second kind of question. Because that right there is an open-ended question. The next, one of my favorite open-ended questions is this one. When was the last time? Because here's what happens, ladies and gentlemen. When we all gather together to have conversations, there's this elephant in the room. This elephant is our ego, like Jojo mentioned. But the moment you ask someone, when was the last time? Suddenly, they go into the world of stories. They start reliving and reminiscing some of the moments from their lives. And in that moment, that elephant in the room gets silenced. And that's when you have your most vulnerable, authentic, genuine conversation and connection. The next, the one most important element of every conversation, yet the most forgotten one, is to remember that silence is a part of every conversation. As human beings, we don't just express ourselves through our words, but also through our silences. In fact, some of the most meaningful conversations I've been a part of are ones in which so much was expressed, yet not a word was spoken. By the way, have you all wondered why the letters in the word silent are the same as the letters in the word listen? Being silent makes you a powerful listener. And that's what creates magic in any conversation that you're part of. The next, be a mirror. One of the reasons why most conversations fail is because one or more of the people in the conversation do not feel understood. But when you reflect back what you're hearing in the conversation by saying, so what I'm hearing you say is, You give an opportunity for them to be understood and for you to understand what they're really saying. And that changes the dynamics of any conversation that you're part of. And finally, check out. If you started the conversation powerfully, leave the conversation powerfully too. Ask them, what's the one thing? And ask yourself, what's the one thing most valuable for me from this conversation? Because the moment you do that, you trick everyone's minds into thinking about the conversation, remembering the conversation, asking yourself, yeah, what was most valuable for me? And when you do that, you suddenly etch the conversation in your mind, and that's what it becomes completely meaningful for everyone. So at this point, if you're wondering how to start applying some of these recipes, I would say start small. Over dinner table with your family, at games night with your friends, at date night with your partner, or at your next team gathering. But start applying some of these recipes and watch how magically the conversations change and become all the more meaningful. I actually envision a world where people come together to have conversations that really matter to them, with their own families, friends, communities, societies, to gain new clarity, to invite diverse perspectives, and to solve problems together. Because that's how I believe change really happens, one meaningful conversation at a time. Which is why I'm so passionate to share this message to as many people as possible. I actually believe that a meaningful conversation is like a warm hug. We kind of feel uncomfortable giving or receiving it, but when we do, it makes us feel safe, it makes us feel happy, and it brings the biggest smile on our face. So my question for you is this. Who in your life deserves that warm hug from you right now? Thank you, everyone.